Welcome to the debate. Imagine a structure so massive, so completely unprecedented in its scale, that it forces you to, rethink how the foundation was ever built in the first place.
Yeah, or wonder if the whole thing is just going to collapse.
Right, exactly. Today, we are looking at the brand new architecture of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. We are talking about a monumental shift in global football. The tournament is expanding to 48 teams, featuring 104 matches and stretching its footprint across three massive nations: Canada, Mexico, and the United States. I'm taking the stance today that this format is a necessary historic evolution. It's a gift to democratize the sport and fund global development.
And I'll be arguing that, frankly, it is a commercially driven overreach. It dilutes the competition, it exhausts players past their breaking point, and it alienates traditional fans, all in the name of, unprecedented revenue.
Okay, well, to really unpack this, I think we need to start with the sheer scale of the 48-team jump, because that is the engine driving everything else.
Oh, absolutely. It's the root of the problem.
Well, I see it as the root of the solution. Look, football is the world's game. But for decades, the World Cup has operated as this highly exclusive, largely Eurocentric and South American club. By jumping to 48 teams, we're looking at 12 groups of 4. That's 72 group stage matches alone. I look at this and I see 72 opportunities for nations to step onto the biggest stage in the world. I mean, we can't genuinely claim it's a World Cup if almost a quarter of FIFA's 211 members don't realistically have a pathway to participate.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Representation is incredibly important, yes, but not at the cost of the sporting integrity of the product itself. I mean, remember when FIFA first floated this 48-team expansion? Their original plan was to have 16 groups of 3 teams.
Right, which they abandoned.
Exactly. They had to scrap it entirely because of the massive risk of match fixing. If you only have 3 teams in a group, the final match is played between 2 teams who perfectly know the exact mathematical result required to just, screw over the third team sitting in the hotel. So to fix that glaring error, they hastily moved to 12 groups of 4.
Which maintains the traditional dynamic. It ensures the final group games are played simultaneously. It preserves the integrity of those matches.
It prevents explicit, organized match fixing, sure, but it introduces something almost as bad, which is tactical match fixing.
Tactical match fixing? That's a bit of a stretch.
No, it's really not. If you're listening to this wondering how that works, think of it like an academic grading curve. The old 32-team group stage was a strict pass-fail exam. Exactly half the class fails. You had to fight for every single point. But this new format, it grades on a massive, highly forgiving curve where 32 out of 48 teams pass.
Right.
When you lower the passing grade that drastically, the students stop studying. In football terms, teams stop attacking. The mathematics actively incentivize managers to just park the bus, to play a low defensive block, waste time, and play for a 0-0 draw. You can literally advance by just drawing twice. You are mathematically rewarding anti-football.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it completely differently. I think you're looking at the group stage purely through the lens of elite European powerhouses.
I'm looking at it through the lens of quality football.
Yes, but for a team like France or Brazil, sure, maybe the math allows them to coast for a game. But for a first-time qualifier, or a nation returning after a 40-year drought, the stakes are completely different. They aren't parking the bus to cynically manipulate a spreadsheet. They are fighting for their sporting lives. True inclusion means giving those nations a chance to create cultural moments on a global broadcast.
I agree with the sentiment, but
Think back to South Africa in 2010. The Waka Waka, the Vuvuzelas, the sheer joy of that opening match. That tournament meant something profound to the entire continent of Africa. When we expand to 48 teams, we allow those unique cultural identities to bleed into the tournament on a much larger scale. It inspires millions of kids who usually just watch from the sideline.
I entirely agree that moments like 2010 are the soul of the World Cup. But let's look at the actual economic and entertainment cost of what you're calling inclusion. Because of this expansion, we now have 104 matches. That is 40 additional games.
Fans are paying exorbitant prices for fixtures that objectively matter less.
The market dictates the prices, though.
But the sentiment is brutal right now. There is a telling quote circulating among supporter groups. One fan summarized it perfectly, saying, "Imagine paying $22,000 just for the score to be 0-0. And the financial barriers aren't just on the secondary ticket market. Fans from 50 different countries are being required to pay a $15,000 bond just to secure a visa to attend. A bond meant to prove they aren't an immigration risk. That isn't inspiring inclusion. It's an exclusionary luxury product."
Okay, wait, the visa bonds are a complex geopolitical issue that's tied to host nation immigration laws. That is not a FIFA sporting regulation. And as for ticket pricing on the secondary market, FIFA doesn't set those $22,000 resale prices.
Oh, come on. They built the official platform that enables it. And they take a cut. On FIFA's own sanctioned resale platform, luxury tickets were listed at $2.25 million each.
Which is for corporate suites, not general admission.
Even so, when Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, was asked about it, he literally joked that he would personally deliver a hot dog to anyone who paid $2 million for a ticket. Traditional fans are furious. There are widespread calls for boycotts, and people are openly encouraging the use of pirated streams because they feel the organization is extracting maximum profit from a deeply diluted product.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on this idea of dilution. Because if you're listening and wondering why we might see more defensive football, we really need to explain the mechanics of the new third-place rule.
Oh, the most confusing rule in sports.
It's really not that confusing. You mentioned 32 teams advancing. The way they get there is the top 2 teams from each of the 12 groups advance automatically. That's 24 teams. To get the remaining 8, the tournament advances the 8 best third-place teams based on points and goal difference. Now, critics call this confusing, but tactically, this format actually keeps more fan bases invested for a much longer period.
It keeps them mathematically invested, but emotionally exhausted.
Hear me out, though. Under the old 32-team format, a team could lose their first 2 games and be mathematically eliminated by day 8. Their third group game becomes a dead rubber. It means absolutely nothing. But by allowing the 8 best third-place teams to advance to the new round of 32, you keep the stakes alive across the board. A team could lose their first 2 games, rally to win their third match, and slip through on goal difference. The hope is kept alive until the very last minute of the group stage.
But it actively destroys the most magical element of the World Cup, which is simultaneous jeopardy. Senior figures in European football have pointed out that this best third-place rule works against the visceral drama of not knowing who is going through.
How so? The games are still played at the same time.
Only within the group. In this new format, a team might finish third in their group on a Tuesday, then they literally have to sit in their hotel for 3 days, waiting to see if a team in a completely different group playing on Friday loses by a wide enough margin to affect the overall goal differential standings. It turns the climax of the group stage into a giant accounting exercise.
It is a logistical puzzle, I'll grant you that.
It's way worse than a puzzle. It incentivizes blowouts. If you are a massive powerhouse team playing a first-time qualifier in your final group match, and you know you need to boost your goal differential to secure a better seeding, you aren't just trying to win. You are incentivized to beat them 6-0 or 7-0. We are going to see brutal, lopsided scores that humiliate the very developing nations you claim this tournament is uplifting. And more importantly, the sheer length of this mathematical waiting game just saps the energy from the tournament. By the time we even reach the quarterfinals, the fans, the media, and certainly the players are going to be entirely fatigued.
Okay, but waiting 3 days in a hotel to see if your goal differential holds up doesn't physically exhaust a player. Let's separate the emotional fatigue of the fans from the physical reality of the athletes.
You can't separate them because this format creates a literal physical crisis for the athletes. The emotional exhaustion of a 104-match tournament is just a symptom of a calendar that is dangerously saturated. I mean, FIFA, the Global Players Union, has released workload data that is, frankly, terrifying.
They have raised concerns, yes.
Elite players are routinely playing over 60 matches a season for their clubs. You have guys like Manchester City's Rodri, who played 72 matches in one season, publicly warning about player strikes due to accumulated fatigue. And then what happened? He suffered a massive season-ending injury shortly after.
Injuries are a tragic, inherent reality of elite sports, but tying them entirely to the World Cup expansion is a bit of a leap when domestic clubs demand so much of them.
It is absolutely not a leap when you look at the medical consensus. Sports science dictates that players need a 28-day off-season rest, minimum, to let their muscles and ligaments recover. Look at the top players competing in these summer tournaments. Almost none of them get that. Alisson Becker, the Brazilian goalkeeper, explicitly said, "Nobody asked the players what they think about adding more games. Everybody is tired of that."
But
Even Pep Guardiola correctly pointed out that this sport can exist without managers, owners, and media, but it cannot exist without the players. And now, because of this expansion creating a new round of 32, if a team reaches the final, they have to play 8 matches instead of 7.
Yes, but FIFA has actually been very rigorous with the calendar math to offset that exact concern.
Rigorous?
Yes, the tournament footprint, the actual duration of the World Cup from the opening match to the final, remains exactly 56 days. That is identical to the 2010, 2014, and 2018 editions. They are not stealing more of the players' summer.
They are cramming more matches into those exact same 56 days.
They are maximizing the efficiency of the calendar. By maintaining that 56-day footprint, they ensure that the mandatory rest and release days remain balanced. The average rest between matches is still fundamentally aligned with global standards. Furthermore, the travel schedule across North America has been innovatively designed within regional clusters.
Right, the clusters.
A team playing their group games in the West Coast cluster won't be flying to New York between matches. FIFA has localized the travel to minimize cross-continental fatigue.
A regional cluster doesn't change the climate of a North American summer, though. We are looking at a map where 6 of the 16 host cities face extreme risk for heat-related illness. And if you are listening and thinking, well, it's hot everywhere, we need to understand the metric being used here. It's called the wet bulb globe temperature.
Yes, the heat index.
It's not just ambient heat, it's heat plus humidity, wind speed, and solar radiation. When the wet bulb temperature exceeds 26 degrees Celsius, the human body can no longer cool itself because sweat stops evaporating. Players are at acute risk of heat stroke. During the 2025 Club World Cup, which served as a test run for this, you had Borussia Dortmund players literally watching the first half of a match from inside the air-conditioned locker room just to avoid the blazing sun in Cincinnati. Those are not optimal performance conditions for an 8-match tournament.
Which is exactly why FIFA implements mandatory cooling breaks when the wet bulb temperature hits that threshold. They have modern stadium infrastructure, advanced cooling systems, and strictly implemented hydration protocols designed specifically to protect player welfare.
I'm sorry, but a 3-minute water break does not solve the fundamental problem of calendar congestion and physical breakdown. The tipping point here is that the players and the leagues are no longer just complaining in press conferences, they are taking legal action.
Right, you're referring to the European leagues.
Yes, the European Club Association, the Premier League, La Liga, the Professional Footballers Association, and FIFPro Europe are actively suing FIFA in the European courts. They are alleging an abuse of a dominant position. Their argument is that the international match calendar is beyond saturation and that FIFA is making unilateral decisions, like expanding the World Cup and the Club World Cup, that explicitly harm the health of players and the economic interests of domestic leagues.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning at all, because we have to look critically at the motivations of these European leagues. As FIFA has pointed out quite clearly, there is a profound level of commercial self-interest and, frankly, hypocrisy at play here.
Hypocrisy?
Absolutely. These domestic leagues complain about player fatigue when it comes to international duties, when players are representing their countries. But they have absolutely no problem packing those exact same exhausted players onto long-haul flights for highly lucrative, completely meaningless preseason commercial tours across Asia and the United States.
Oh, come on. A preseason friendly where a start player jogs around for 45 minutes to sell shirts in Tokyo is very different from an ultra-competitive, high-stakes knockout match in an expanded World Cup. You cannot compare the physical intensity.
The physical toll of the travel, the jet lag, and the deprivation of a proper 28-day off-season remains exactly the same regardless of the match's stakes. The European elite want to control the players' time entirely so they can maximize their own domestic television profits.
FIFA, on the other hand, is tasked with a much broader mandate, which is growing the game globally, and that requires massive funding, which brings us to the revenue, which you framed earlier as a purely corporate cash grab.
I did, and the numbers absolutely back it up. We are looking at an expected cycle revenue jumping from $6.4 billion to $13 billion.
Exactly. It's a massive 70% increase. But we have to explain how that money is used. What does FIFA actually do with $13 billion? As a nonprofit organization, they are mandated to reinvest more than 90% of their budgeted investments directly back into the game.
Right.
That includes a brand new $660 million football development fund. It includes $2.25 billion for the Forward 3.0 program. If you aren't familiar with Forward 3.0, it's not just an abstract bureaucratic title. It represents a 29% increase in direct funding to member associations. It is literal cash injected into developing nations to build functional pitches, to professionalize women's domestic leagues, and to set up youth academies in regions that the English Premier League and La Liga entirely ignore.
But at what cost to the sport itself?
The cost is a larger tournament. Arsene Wenger, FIFA's chief of global football development, has defended this brilliantly. He points out that for the vast majority of the world outside of Europe, FIFA revenues are the absolute only lifeline they have. The English Premier League has a multi-billion-dollar TV deal. The Football Federation of a small African or Asian nation does not. If we want smaller nations to develop, that money has to come from somewhere. The World Cup is the economic engine that powers global football. Expanding it is the only way to generate the capital necessary to truly democratize the sport.
That is a highly sanitized view of how that $13 billion is generated. It is generated by squeezing the fans with those $22,000 secondary tickets and wringing the players dry. Yes, development funds are necessary. Nobody is arguing against building pitches in developing nations. But you cannot destroy the pinnacle of the sport to fund its grassroots.
Destroying the pinnacle is a bit dramatic.
The European Club Association, Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, domestic unions, they are all looking at this and saying, we have to focus on the sport again. Politics and commerce should not be the exclusive priority. When you stretch a tournament to 104 matches, when you implement a mathematically confusing best-of-third-place progression that rewards defensive football, and when your players are literally begging for a break, you are risking the golden goose.
Look, I think calling it the destruction of the pinnacle of the sport is a massive exaggeration. We heard these exact same catastrophic predictions when the World Cup expanded from 16 to 24 teams, and we heard it again in 1998 when it went from 24 to 32 teams.
It's different this time.
Every single time, traditionalists claimed the quality would plummet and the tournament would be ruined. And every single time, the global game adapted. The talent pool deepened, and the tournament grew richer in its narratives.
The critical difference between 1998 and today is the physiological limit of the human body. Going from 24 to 32 teams did not require athletes to exceed 70 competitive matches a year in an already completely saturated calendar. We have hit the ceiling of what players can physically endure. Mahida Malengo, the head of the English Players Union, warned us very clearly. As always, it's the players who are expected to bend. As we have seen, eventually they will break. We are trading the health of the athletes for a bloated television product.
Well, it seems we have arrived at the core tension of this debate. Let's summarize our positions as we look toward the 2026 kickoff. I maintain that the 48-team format, despite the undeniable logistical complexities of managing 104 matches across 3 massive nations, is a necessary, historic evolution. It is the ultimate mechanism to fund global development, to give emerging footballing nations a legitimate seat at the table, and to generate the resources required to lift the sport worldwide.
And I maintain that the expansion is fundamentally a commercial cash grab masked as inclusion. It exploits the physical health of the very players who make the game beautiful. It mathematically dilutes the sporting product by removing the early-stage jeopardy that creates classic matches, and it caters to elite corporate interests while pricing traditional fans completely out of the stadiums.
Well, we both certainly agree that the 2026 World Cup will be completely unprecedented in its scale, its geographical footprint, and its financial impact.
Without a doubt, it will be the biggest sporting event in human history, purely by the numbers. Where we diverge is whether the soul of the tournament, the actual quality of the football played on the pitch, can survive that sheer volume of matches and travel.
Ultimately, managing the tension between global inclusion and the physical limits of the athletes will define this next era of the sport. As we watch the tournament unfold across North America, we'll see if the new architecture holds up. We invite you, the listener, to observe the upcoming matches and decide for yourselves. When a massive powerhouse faces a first-time qualifier, or when a team waits 3 days to see if their goal differential sends them to the round of 32, look critically at the product. Will the beautiful game be elevated to new, breathtaking heights of global representation, or has it simply been stretched too thin?
We will find out in 2026.